Hello and welcome to another episode of Talking About Adaptability. Today we're going to the United States to era as Wolfe. Sounds great. Let's go. Yes, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Talking About Adaptability. Today's guest is Mr. Wolfe. Before I introduce you, I just kick off with the question, what's the first thing that comes to mind if I say adaptability?
It is VUCA, V-U-C-A, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
Wow, we've got something to talk about. Let's talk. Yes, I've heard that the VUCA. Can you explain it a little bit for the viewers who have never heard about that?
Absolutely, Tom. Appreciate it. VUCA, I didn't come up with it, so I want to give full credit to where it came from. It's Warren Bennis, which is one of my favorite thought leaders. He has been around for decades, very popular in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And he came up with this term, thinking about in the late 80s what the world was going to look at. Things were starting to accelerate, change, get faster, technology, the computer, computers. I mean, think about that, the internet. We weren't even using the internet really at that point very, very well. And he was anticipating that the future of leadership would be dependent upon our ability to lead and manage and survive and thrive in a volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous world. And that just a few years later was adopted by the military, U.S. military. Once the Berlin Wall came down, they recognized that we would no longer be fighting sovereign nations, but terrorism, cyber criminals. And that again, there were no more World War I's and World War II's and world wars against countries, but it would be becoming a very dangerous world in other ways. Which obviously in 2021, we are now realizing that. So VUCA was 2021. I describe. I don't think there's a better acronym that we have or a better word, if you want to call it that. That we had than what 2020 was: volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous.
So, absolutely, but I mean, we're living now in this crazy world that almost changes every day. And VUCA is still up to it? I mean, in the world we're living in right now.
We're just saying the first chapter. And, if you looked at from Warren Bennis in the military and then the involvement, I've been writing about it. I think I discovered it in the early 2000s. And I wrote about it and then go, well, everybody must know what VUCA is at that point. Look how crazy and fast the world was. And that was mid 2000s. And then I wrote my book. One of my earlier books my first book was Perfect Labor Storm, which really didn't talk about VUCA because I wasn't introduced to the term yet. And then I wrote about Googleization, which was really my variation of what that was. It was about a convergence of people, technology, and business. And then my last book, which was Recruiting in the Age of Googleization, was really focused on what many organizations now are experiencing, those labor shortages. Yeah. But we are just at the early stages. I mean, this isn't something like, oh, we had VUCA, we're going to talk about it, and then we're going to move on to something else. VUCA is going to be with us for a very long time because we are living on that exponential curve, and when you're living on that curve, it doesn't go up and then flatten out. It just continues to speed up and accelerate.
When you look at the word like adaptability, where does it come in? I mean, is it, I think, every stage, or is it in the beginning more important when you look at the whole process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I talk about the 4 stages of adaptability. And we many people are really struggling now. Many people are failing. I mean, they're falling behind, and that we both study adaptability. So there's people that are really, really struggling, and I'm not just saying coping with it, but they are just falling behind. They're being left behind because the world's moving so fast. So we have people that are declining. We have people that are coping. And then there's growing is the next stage that we're able to be better than just coping. And then there's thriving, flourishing. We're loving it. We're really blossoming. We're using every bit of change as a catalyst for improvement. So we have those 4 stages. If you think about that, every human being is going to go through all 4 stages at times. So we could be flourishing one day and boom, yesterday, Facebook goes down. And it's like, if your business was dependent on Facebook or depending on something else, so whatever it is, there's just going to be continuous change. And that's part of the challenge. So we're going to need to have those skills that we're going to be running along. We're going to hit a brick wall. We're going to get knocked down. So we need to be more resilient. We need to get up and continue going. But we also need to know when to shift gears. And I think that's really the differentiator with adaptability. It's not just having grit and resilience. It's not being able to be knocked down, get back up, and keep on going. Put your nose to the grindstone. Stay laser focused. Just identify that target, because the problem is the target's going to keep moving and there's going to be a lot of roadblocks. So is it going to be with us for a long time? Oh, absolutely. And everybody's going to need to become better at it.
Absolutely. And then you talked about grit and perseverance and mental strength, etc. I'm also a stand-up comedian, so for me, humor is a great aspect. Is a great. It's my product. Do you also believe having joy, having fun in work, in learning process, that's an important aspect?
Oh, absolutely. Well-being. Look around the world. Look at businesses. Look at people burnt out, mental illness. Addictions. So there are people that are absolutely struggling. So absolutely, we need to help people become better at managing their lives, of learning. One of the things I say, one of the slides I use when I do a presentation, or one of the images I use, not necessarily a slide, is how to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And I'm not sure you or I ever walk in high heels, but the image I use, is basically walking in a high heel, and it doesn't look very comfortable, especially for a guy to be able to do that.
There are some people in Amsterdam who love to do that. So that's
I love my Skechers and flat shoes. So the reality is we're going to have to learn how to really become comfortable being uncomfortable, moving forward. But there's more. And again, so many people just focus on grit and resilience. That's what we need, or they describe flexibility. And flexibility is a challenge because it's a reactive response. Flexible means, I can shift directions. I've had other setbacks, and I've always been able to adapt. No, that's not necessarily adaptation. Being flexible just means you're gonna wait for that roadblock. You're gonna wait for that, and then you're gonna figure out how to adjust. Get on. But we also don't have the time that much. So there's a speed element, and I think that's the part that people don't understand. It's like, I've had setbacks in my life. I've lost a loved one. I've been fired for a job. I lost my business. I've been bankrupt. But how long did it take you to rebound? How long did it take you? And maybe it only took you a few months. Maybe it took you years. In today's world, we don't have that opportunity to take a long period of time to get over a setback. And also, I mentioned this earlier, just having grit, just having that long-term focus, have dead eyes straight ahead. The half-life of a job skill today is less than 5 years. Yeah. It used to be 5 decades. You were able to go to went to school. Maybe even high school, some of our parents or grandparents. You may not even finished high school. You may be dropped out at 8th grade. You got a job, and you can work in that industry for 30, 40, 50 years. Well, and people didn't live that long, but they lived and they got their gold watch at the end, and that was it. And now, literally, when you think about it, you spend $100,000, $200,000 for an education, and what you learned in the first year of school, paying all that money, may not be relevant by the time you graduate. So things are just moving so fast.
Absolutely. Now, talking about what you just said, I mean, the normal study system, the colleges, etc. Because also we're now in an era that you have to unlearn some things because I mean things are going different right now. But how do you keep people motivated to unlearn? That's a tough one.
Well, I think both of us would agree with this. We answer that it's learning. We need to teach people to become more adaptable because part of that process is just say the organization that we're both familiar with, the science, their studies, their research has identified 5 abilities. So grit and resilience are incredibly important. Doesn't matter what stage you're at, if you're in that thriving, flourishing stage, or whether you're in a declining coping stage, you still are going to you're still going to need grit and resilience, but to really become adaptable you're going to need to unlearn. That's relatively new. Adam Grant talks about it a lot. He talks about rethinking. How do you reframe situations? I talk about it as defragging a hard drive, and I know many people will understand that, but or you have a filing cabinet, you have a desk, you save everything, you're a pack rat. You just have all this old information that maybe someday I'm still going to need it. But on a day-to-day basis, it just crowds our brain. We can't find the stuff we need fast enough. So we're either going to declutter our files and our boxes and our basements and our closets, or we're going to defrag our hard drive. And that doesn't mean we get rid of that information. It doesn't mean that we just do a brain dump and go, oh, everything I learned for 10 years or 20 years is no good. But Absolutely. We have to reorganize it, keep the good parts, put it away. But we need to make room for the good stuff, the stuff that we need on a day-to-day basis. So we need to learn how to become better declutterers, better defraggers, and be able to then make room for the stuff that we need. So we do need to continue to learn. It's not that, oh, goodness, I don't need an education. I can do a brain dump on half of what I've learned before and just continue on. No, we have to continuous learning is still vital. But while we're doing that, we also have to change. And unlearn is really changing behavior. It's not that we can't store everything up here. Is that the way we did things over and over again, we can't continue doing that because the same process, the same information just may not work.
Yeah, but it's also companies are sometimes they have a sort of structure, and then it's difficult to unlearn because when you want to teach people something, I mean, where do you start? Do you start with the CEOs? Is it leading by example, or do you take the whole bunch and tell everybody what you want them to know? I mean, because if you're a CEO, you're 50 or 60 years old, it's harder to unlearn than you are 20. So there's also a big challenge over there.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, and I'm certainly on the higher end. I'm that millennial trapped in the baby boomer body. So
that was a great sentence of you.
I'm definitely an older baby boomer, and yet I'm continually doing it. So to let everybody know out there, yeah, it may be a little difficult. I've got to hang around some people that understand some of the newer technologies and how to use some things, or I do that on my own. But to go back to your question, is it the leadership that needs to become better at it, or the individuals, the everyday Tom and Ira that need to figure this out? And it's a chicken or the egg. It's both. I don't think, leaders, organizations, I mean, you look at the leaders of businesses like Kodak and Blockbuster and Sears and that, hey, we've been doing this for 100 years. We're just going to continue doing it. So everybody's going to need that. I think it's a chicken or the egg, but certainly going back to, if we look at companies, we look at organizations that both of us work with, those individuals they have to be in the right environment. There's a lot of people that are going to struggle with this. The leaders really need to create an environment that allows people to unlearn, because while you're learning and unlearning, you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be not everybody's going to just get it. You can't send somebody to a class, learn. You may be able to learn a technical skill, but learning to how to manage people better, how to become better problem solvers, critical thinkers, how to collaborate, how to operate in a hybrid work environment, which we're all kind of evolving right now. There is not going to be, oh, we got it. We're going to study this for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. We come up with a solution, and then it's clear sailing. There's going to be mistakes. So management, leadership needs to create environments that not only allow the employees to say, I understand as an employee that my company has my back, that they're gonna help me grow, they're gonna help me adapt. That the people I work with, then when I turn to the right and the left, or look straight ahead on a screen, that those people are going to have my back. And also, really, and you mentioned this earlier about well-being and mental health, that they care not only about how much money I make for them and how many widgets or how much I can produce, but they care about my well-being. They actually care that I'm okay. And so it relates to company support, team support, environmental health, the job itself. I mean, there's many jobs. I mean, can you imagine healthcare workers? And some of the stress that they're under, and grocery store workers and servers. I mean, people are not, in many cases, not as kind as they were. These jobs are stressful. There's a lot of burnout. Companies just have to recognize that all that is very real. And so they have to set up cultures to support that, benefits to support that. On the flip side, you just can't create a company that says, yeah, we're really supportive, and yeah, we're going to take care of you, but don't worry, people, you don't have to make any change. No, they still have to unlearn. They have to become better at grit. And then, we have other skills like mental flexibility and mindset. People just have to become better at dealing with ambiguity. I always use the example of watching CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News, at least in the U.S. And you can and it's like, what universe am I living in? It sounds like there's alternate realities.
Yes.
And we have to learn to make sense of that. And that's, to me, that's actually the toughest skill. I mean, for me, it's natural. That's actually when we do the AQAI, that's my highest score is mental flexibility, dealing with cognitive dissonance. How do you make sense of chaos? I always can find some common threads and go, yeah, I can see both sides of that story and formulate something new. But that's not what everybody can do.
Yeah. And if you look at, a lot of startups, they are pretty flexible because they're 10, 20, 30 people, and they just follow their goal, and it's shifting because they want every day something new. And we've got some companies like, when you work at Google, you have one day off to be creative and flexible, etc. But there's a big gap of companies who still work like they worked 10 years ago or 20 years ago. When do they cope? How do they cope?
Well, let's go back to healthcare. Healthcare is in a crisis now, and there's nurses are getting burnt out, physicians are getting burnt out, staff is getting burnt out. They're overworked. Every single bed is filled in many cases. A lot of times it's critical care. We were just had a family member who was in the hospital, and fortunately, most of the staff was super, really good. But we watched how many times they had to deal with death and sorrow and families grieving. And it's, day in and day out doing that. And then people not respecting them, people not trusting them. So we don't get into politics of that. But so how can an organization in the heat of the moment, in the battle, also, and being short-staffed, also take the time to help the people, the workers, the healthcare providers deal with that. Because they're getting the brunt of it. And I don't have an easy answer. Part of that is you can teach people to be more resilient and more gritty and unlearn and deal with this mental flexibility, make sense of it. But organizations really have to do a much better job at creating that support, making sure that they have that well-being. And if you have a full house, every bed's full, they're all critical care, and you don't have enough nurses and physicians to take care of them, I don't know how you say, listen, take a day off.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
have an
impossible.
answer for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But somebody's going to have to figure it out. I mean,
On the
and it's going to take a village. It's going to take a lot of people to figure this out.
Absolutely. On the other hand, I mean, another example for healthcare, I mean, that's what I heard from some hospitals, that sometimes it takes 3, 4, 5 years to implement a new software system or a new recruitment system.
I was
And
there.
because of COVID, they had to do it in 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And sometimes a process that normally took 3 or 5 years, they did it in 1 or 2 months. So that is also, I mean, a great job they did in some hospitals, that they really made a difference in 1 month instead of 3 years because of a crisis situation. So that's when we talk about adaptability, that's a great example.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I think part of it is, well, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We're not allowed. There's regulations.
Yeah.
But you look, that makeshift hospitals. I mean, parking lots, tents in hospitals being turned into environment, and how many people survived that. So it was possible. So there's a lot of good things that came out of the pandemic, and hopefully we won't forget those, that we can do things faster. Even the vaccine. I mean, the vaccine, and again, I can speak best for the U.S., to have a new medication from scratch built or created. Oh, and in the case of Moderna and Pfizer, not a live vaccine that we have to collect it and test it, but literally a manufactured vaccine, that they were able to do that and have it to market and have it in people's arms within 9 months. And initially people said, well, you'll never get it through the FDA approval.
Yeah.
It will take years. And yet, not only did they create it, but they somehow got it approved. So hopefully many of those things we've learned. And let's take something that affects everybody's. Overnight, I use this statistic all the time, and I can't remember which survey this was from, and I apologize. It might have been a McKinsey or a Deloitte or a BCG. And in 2019, they surveyed executives, leadership, and they said 98% said that remote work would not work for their business.
Yeah.
98%. 2% said, oh, yeah, we can do it. So, yes, but even the Googles and the Facebooks of the world, they said, no, we need people. They were building these big corporate places to go to. And then overnight, in the U.S., it was March 13th. Overnight, there were millions of people that went remote.
Yeah.
And, it was a little uncomfortable in the beginning. Sure. People were struggling. People didn't have internet connection.
Yeah.
People didn't have an IT department to go to. Hey, I can't get on. How do I download this? Now, I think it's up to 80% say that, yes, we can have a hybrid work. But what does that look like? Hybrid work could be hybrid means hybrid. But there's a percentage, there's 20% that say that it could be completely remote, one out of 5. So if we only had 2% before, now we have 20%. That's a pretty big increase.
Yes. Yeah.
And then you have all these other groups. And then what hybrid looks like is that's a creativity. So if we look at that is affecting everyday people, yet there's still, going back to our leadership question, Tom, there are still people that's saying, no, we have to go back to being all in person. That's the only way it'll work.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Absolutely. Because there were also people, on the work floor who said, well, we can make cameras with a memory card. But the leader said, no, how are we going to sell our cartridges? That is, so there's a lot of examples that sometimes the people are adaptable and employees want to go the right direction. But you have to, sometimes as a CEO, to have the better insight and to know what you are talking about.
Yeah, be even home. I mean, there's so many examples that you think about adaptability that we don't say, leaders need to be adaptable. No, workers need to be adaptable, but I don't need, a teacher doesn't need to be adaptable. You just go back. Well, teachers obviously needed to be adaptable, in many different ways. But there's probably not anything we do on a daily basis. Even how many people would have thought prior, let's say February 2020, that you can order your groceries online?
Yeah.
You go, no, you got to shop. You got to see. You got to touch.
Go to the mall.
You got to do it's a trip. You have to touch and feel it, and then all of a sudden it's no, you don't. Absolutely. And it's like, and people got disappointed when some of those features went away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it again, there's so many things, and there's smaller degrees of adaptability. Not everybody has to change their career. We talk. I talk about. There's so many things that we're still learning. I mean, it's every day a new example comes up. But even degrees of learning, the think of, I think I'm going to change my job, or I'm going to go work for another business, it requires you to be adaptable. You're going to have you change your route, your commute, or if you can stay home, you're going to have to adapt to a new boss, new coworkers, new regulations, new policies, all that stuff. But that's less. You don't need as much adaptability for that as you do changing a career.
Yeah.
So when you're changing your career, now I've got to learn a lot of new stuff. I've got to unlearn a lot of new stuff. And now I'm going to be working in a new job with new people with different expectations. And I'm going to make more mistakes because I don't have any experience, because it's a new career. But so there's degrees of that. So even changing a job requires somebody to be adaptable. Getting a new responsibility requires somebody to be adaptable. But if you're going to change a career, then it should be a requirement. I'm writing an article about this, that adaptability is everybody's job. Adaptability is your job. And whatever you do, whatever job title you have after that, is just going to be a fact of life. But every single person is going to have to learn to become more adaptable, unless you're just frozen in state, I guess. I'm not.
Oh, wait a minute. I think that's my studio manager. Mostly at the end, she calls when I forget something. Yes? Yes? Oh, oh really? Oh, yeah. All right, thank you. Yeah, you're trying. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I almost forgot. Can you shortly, you also did a TED Talk about change, is that right?
I did. That prompted my last book. It was called "Make Change Work for You." Anybody can go up and look at it's TED Talk. You can type my name in and "Make Change Work for You." And I talked about VUCA. I mean, where we started this conversation, and we talked about VUCA, and I was using this a little bit in my TED Talk, but VUCA Prime. So how do you turn volatility? You have a vision, you have a long-term goal, you have an imagination. A lot of people don't. They just go through the motions. How do you deal with uncertainty? And that's understanding. Again, learning. What are different ways? We talk about complexity, and that could be communication. Again, how do we communicate with that with other people, and learn how to communicate digitally with that. And then we had ambiguity, and at the time I was talking about that being about abundance, and many people do use that, or agility, or now I would say it's adaptability. The A is how do you deal with ambiguity? It's learning to become more adaptable, which really crosses all of that.
Okay, cool. Well, Mr. Wolfe, thank you very much. We also, almost at the end, I just want to point out this is your LinkedIn profile. If people want to look you up, you wrote some great books. And I also have, the last question is a personal question. Is that okay if I have a personal question for you?
Absolutely. As long as it's okay, I don't have to answer it, right?
Well, you don't have to answer. And I've got this great system, because I've got here 8 questions. And I've got this wheel, and we could do it 2 ways. We could say, well, you just say, the question number 1 is the easy question, and 8 is the more difficult question.
Okay.
So, or you're going to say now, well, I just picked that one, or shall we do the wheel and see what happens?
Let's take our chances. Let's do the wheel.
Okay, cool. That's what I like. That's what I like. Let's see what happens. It is going to be question number, and it's always very exciting. It's going to be, oh, you're okay. Question number 4. Question number 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Let's see. Yes. Question number 4. I always like this. And what is your favorite animal?
Favorite animal? I'm going to say a dog.
A dog. Do you have a dog?
We don't have a dog now.
Okay.
Because we didn't want the respect. We do too much traveling and going away.
I totally understand. Yeah.
But,
My favorite animal is an octopus. I don't have an octopus, but I love them because of their intelligence, and I think they're pretty adaptable. So, Mr. Wolfe, thank you very much for joining this program. So if people want to know everything about the recruiting Googleization, that's the latest book. It's behind you. And yeah, very good. Look, Mr. Wolfe at LinkedIn. This is his LinkedIn profile. And I want to thank you very much, and see you next time on Talk About.
Hey, thanks very much, Tom. It's been fun. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.